The bodies floated past the patrol boat at dawn, spinning slowly in the brown water of the Euphrates like broken compass needles searching for true north. Sergeant Kimura counted 6 of them before he radioed it in. All militia fighters, all dead from wounds that made no sense. No bulitoles, no shrapnel patterns, just precise cuts and strikes that spoke of something more personal than combat, something surgical. The river ran red that night. The locals would whisper for months afterward, and they never found who did it. But this story does not begin at dawn with floating bodies. It begins 72 hours earlier, in a shipping container that smelled like dust and diesel, where a woman everyone underestimated was about to change everything. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state or country you're watching from. Maybe you know someone who served in places like this, in the forgotten corners of wars that never quite ended. Specialist Yemisi Adeyemi pressed her palms flat against the metal desk and stared at the satellite imagery until her eyes burned. Forward Operating Base Reliance sat like a scab on the banks of the Euphrates, a temporary wound the desert was slowly trying to heal over. She had been here for 4 months. 4 months of processing reports. 4 months of watching convoys roll out and sometimes not roll back. 4 months of being invisible. The operations center door banged open and Private Odia stumbled in, his face carrying the particular terror of a young soldier who had made a serious mistake. Yemisi knew that look. She had worn it herself once, back before she learned that fear was just information your body gave you, and information could be managed. Private Odia whispered that he had fallen asleep on duty. 45 minutes. Tower 6. If anyone found out, he was finished. Court-martial. Discharge. His mother back in Houston would never recover from the shame. Yemisi checked the duty log, checked the tower rotation schedule. Then she did something that surprised them both. She told him to go back to his rack. Get some sleep. Real sleep this time. She would handle it. But specialist, he started. She cut him off with a look that carried more weight than her rank should have allowed. The log says I checked Tower 6 at 0330. The log says everything was fine. Unless you want to tell me the log is wrong. He stared at her for a long moment, trying to understand why someone he barely knew would take that risk. Then he nodded once and disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. Yemisi turned back to her satellite imagery. This was who she was, she reminded herself. The woman who noticed things. The woman who helped people. The woman who everyone thought was just a secretary playing soldier. She pulled up the convoy attack reports from the past 6 weeks. 17 incidents. 43 casualties. The official analysis said the insurgents were getting better at reading patrol patterns. Random adaptation to American tactics. Bad luck and better enemies. But Yemisi saw something else. She saw geometry. She saw intention. Every attack happened within a 3-kilometer radius of the same 4 grid coordinates. Every ambush used the same approach vectors. This was not random. This was planned by someone who knew exactly where American forces would be and exactly when they would be there. The door opened again, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Master Sergeant Dale Crenshaw filled the doorway like a wall of barely contained hostility. He was the kind of man who had learned to make his size into a weapon long before the army taught him to use actual weapons. Adeyemi, he said, stretching her name into something that sounded like an insult. You finished those supply requisitions yet, or are you too busy playing intelligence analyst again? Yemisi kept her voice flat. She told him the requisitions were filed yesterday, and the imagery analysis was part of her assigned duties. Your assigned duties are whatever I say they are. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee and tobacco on his breath. And I say your duties are paperwork. Not playing soldier. Not pretending you belong out there with the men who actually fight. She said nothing. Held his gaze. Let him see nothing but compliance. Crenshaw snorted. That's what I thought. He grabbed a folder from her desk without asking and walked out. Yemisi waited until his footsteps faded. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a small notebook hidden beneath a stack of regulations manuals. Inside were dates, times, observations, every instance of Crenshaw leaving the wire without logging it. Every meeting with local contacts that happened off the books. Every small discrepancy that alone meant nothing, but together formed a picture she was still trying to understand. She added today's entry. His hostility was escalating. That meant something. Pressure revealed character, and his character was starting to crack. Her computer chimed with an incoming message. Encrypted traffic on a frequency she was not supposed to be monitoring. But 4 months ago, in her first week at FOB Reliance, she had noticed the encryption was outdated. Breakable. So she broke it, and she had been listening ever since. The message was short. Coordinates. A time. And 3 words that turned her blood to ice. The woman who watches. Someone new. Someone on the other end of that encrypted channel knew she was paying attention. And they had just told everyone exactly who to look for. Yemisi closed the notebook, closed the message, and began to plan. She did not sleep that night. Instead, Yemisi sat in the darkness of her quarters and worked the encryption by hand, writing out letter substitutions on scrap paper until the full message revealed itself. Coordinates she recognized immediately. The river crossing 3 miles east of the FOB, where the Euphrates narrowed enough for small boats to make quick transfers. A time. 48 hours from now, and a name that made her hands shake so badly she had to set down her pen. Abu Samir. The name hit her like a physical blow. 2 years collapsed into nothing, and suddenly she was back in a notification office at Fort Hood, sitting in a chair that felt like it was swallowing her whole, while a chaplain explained that her brother Marcus was not coming home. Convoy ambush. Anbar province. Killed in action. The words had meant nothing at the time. They were just sounds that could not possibly be connected to her brother, her protector, the man who had taught her to shoot when she was 12 and told her she was going to be stronger than anyone expected. It took her 3 months to learn the name of the militia commander who led that ambush. Abu Samir, a ghost who moved through the insurgency like smoke, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. She had requested transfer after transfer until she finally landed in Anbar province. For months at FOB Reliance, and she had never gotten closer than whispered rumors. Now he was coming to her. Yemisi pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. She could not let grief drive this. Grief made you sloppy. Grief got you killed. She breathed in for 4 counts. Held for 4. Out for 4. The technique Marcus had taught her when she was a teenager struggling with anxiety. Focus on what you can control, he always said. Let go of everything else. She could control her preparation. She could control her positioning. She could control whether she was ready when the moment came. Dawn light crept through the gap in her door, and Yemisi finally moved. She had work to do. The operations center was quiet at 0600. Just a skeleton crew monitoring radios and pretending to stay awake. Specialist Torres nodded at her as she entered, but did not speak. That was fine. Yemisi preferred the silence. She pulled up the duty roster for the next 72 hours. Crenshaw had her scheduled for operations center shifts both nights. 12-hour blocks that would keep her trapped inside the wire, staring at screens, unable to move. That was not coincidence. He was boxing her in. Captain Restrepo arrived at 0730, coffee in hand, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He was a good officer. Fair. Overworked. The kind of man who wanted to do right, but had too many fires to fight and not enough water. Yemisi intercepted him before he reached his desk. She told him she had found something in the convoy attack patterns. Something that suggested the ambushes were not random. Someone was feeding the insurgents information about American movements. Restrepo stopped walking. His eyes sharpened despite the fatigue. That was a serious accusation, he said. What evidence did she have? She showed him a map she had prepared. The attack locations. The grid coordinates. The timing patterns that were too precise to be coincidence. She explained that someone with access to patrol schedules was passing information to the enemy. Someone inside the wire. Restrepo studied the map for a long moment. She could see him connecting dots, weighing possibilities, running through the implications. Then his expression closed like a door slamming shut. He told her he appreciated her diligence. He would look into it. but he advised her to be careful about making accusations without concrete proof. Careers have been destroyed by less. She understood. She told him she would keep gathering evidence. Restrepo nodded and walked away, but she saw the way his eyes drifted toward Crenshaw's empty desk. He suspected something too. He just could not act on suspicion alone. Yemisi returned to her station and pulled up the inventory system. Deep in the supply records, buried under requisition forms and maintenance logs, she found what she was looking for. Her personal equipment. The gear she had shipped to herself in pieces over the past 4 months, hidden in legitimate supply requests. A suppressed rifle broken down into components. Night vision equipment listed as spare parts. A tactical kit that no intelligence analyst should possess. She had been preparing for this since the day she arrived. She just had not known what she was preparing for until now. The day crawled past in a haze of routine duties and careful observation. She watched Crenshaw move through the FOB like he owned it, glad-handing with senior NCOs, joking with the soldiers who did not know any better. He was good at the performance. Years of practice hiding what he really was. At 1600, an alarm shattered the afternoon quiet. Incoming patrol taking fire. Grid coordinates that Yemisi recognized instantly from her map. Another attack in the pattern. More Americans bleeding because someone in this FOB was selling their lives for money. She listened to the radio traffic as the quick reaction force rolled out. Listened to the gunfire crackling through the speakers. Listened to the calls for medevac and the silence that followed when someone stopped responding. 3 wounded. 1 critical. The patrol had been hit exactly where her analysis predicted. Yemisi found Private Odia in the chow hall that evening, pushing food around his plate with the hollow look of someone who had heard too much over the radio. She sat down across from him without asking permission. He told her one of the wounded was his squad leader. Sergeant Frazier. Good man. Might not make it through the night. She did not offer empty comfort. Instead, she told him that the people responsible would answer for it. All of them. She promised him that. He looked at her strangely, like he was seeing someone different than the quiet analyst who processed paperwork. She let him look. Later that night, after the FOB had settled into its uneasy darkness, Yemisi made her way to the supply depot. Her hidden gear was exactly where she had left it. She ran her fingers over the rifle components, checking each piece by touch. Everything was ready. 46 hours until the river crossing. 46 hours until Abu Samir stepped into her crosshairs. And somewhere between now and then, she had to find a way out of Crenshaw's trap. She thought about Marcus, about the way he used to laugh at her frustration when she could not hit a target. Slow down, he would say. The shot will come. Trust your training. She was trusting it now. She just hoped it would be enough. The next morning brought a surprise that Yemisi had not anticipated. Crenshaw found her in the operations center with a smile on his face. That smile worried her more than his usual hostility. Hostility, she understood. Friendliness from a man like Crenshaw meant he was planning something. He told her he had been thinking about their conversation. Maybe he had been too hard on her. She was right that analysts needed field experience to do their jobs properly. So he had arranged something special. A convoy escort mission heading east along the river road. She would ride along as an observer. See how real soldiers operated. Yemisi kept her expression neutral even as alarm bells screamed in her head. The river road. The same route she had flagged in her analysis. The same corridor where 3 convoys had been hit in the past month. She asked when the mission was scheduled. Tomorrow morning, Crenshaw said. 0600. Consider it a professional development opportunity. He walked away before she could respond, that smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. Yemisi watched him go and felt the pieces clicking into place. He was not just boxing her in anymore. He was trying to get her killed. Send her out on a convoy he knew would be ambushed. Let the insurgents solve his problem for him. Clean and deniable. She had 36 hours until the river crossing. 20 hours until a convoy ride that was designed to be her coffin. Yemisi spent the next 4 hours in the operations center, studying every scrap of data she could access. Patrol routes, terrain analysis, historical attack patterns. If Crenshaw wanted to send her into an ambush, she would make sure it was an ambush she controlled. The convoy was scheduled to take Route Tampa East, then cut north on a supply road that paralleled the river. Standard logistics run. For vehicles, 12 personnel plus heure. The attack would come at the northern turn, where the road narrowed between rocky outcroppings that provided perfect cover for an ambush team. Unless the convoy did not take that turn. She pulled up the mission planning system and found the route authorization form. Crenshaw had filed it himself, which was unusual. Senior NCOs rarely handled logistics paperwork. He wanted to make sure the route stayed exactly as planned. Yemisi hesitated for only a moment. Then she accessed the form and made a small modification. The northern turn became an eastern turn, a longer route that avoided the choke point entirely. She buried the change in a batch of routine updates and logged out. If anyone checked, they would see the modification. But Crenshaw would not check. He was too confident, too certain that his plan was already in motion. Dawn came gray and cold. Yemisi geared up with the standard equipment issued to convoy personnel. Helmet, body armor, a rifle she knew how to use far better than anyone here suspected. She joined the convoy crew at the vehicle staging area and drew curious looks from soldiers who had never seen the quiet analyst outside the wire. Sergeant Wakefield commanded the convoy, a stocky woman with 20 years in the Army and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Yemisi up and down and asked if she had ever been outside the wire before. Yemisi told her she had some experience. Wakefield snorted but did not press. She had bigger concerns than babysitting an analyst. The convoy rolled out at 0615. Yemisi rode in the second vehicle, watching the desert scroll past through dusty windows. The driver, a young specialist named Chun, tried to make small talk. She answered in monosyllables until he gave up. 40 minutes into the mission, Wakefield called over the radio. They were approaching the northern turn. Yemisi held her breath. The lead vehicle did not turn north. It continued east, following the modified route she had programmed. Crenshaw's voice crackled over the command frequency, demanding to know why the convoy had deviated from the planned route. Wakefield responded that she was following the route authorization system. If there was a problem with the paperwork, she suggested he take it up with logistics. Yemisi allowed herself a small smile. They took the eastern route, a longer path that curved away from the river before looping back to their destination. No choque points. No emboscadas. Just open desert where any attack would be visible from a kilometer away. The ambush came anyway, but it came wrong. The insurgents had positioned themselves at the northern turn, waiting for a convoy that never arrived. When they realized their targets had taken a different route, they scrambled to reposition. Yemisi saw the dust clouds from their vehicles racing to intercept. She saw the disorganization in their movement, the confusion of a plan falling apart. She keyed her radio and told Wakefield they had contact moving to intercept from the northwest. For vehicles, maybe 20 fighters. They were disorganized and out of position. Wakefield did not ask how an analyst had spotted the threat before her experienced gunners. She simply ordered the convoy to increase speed and called for air support. The insurgents caught up to them 2 kilometers from the FOB, close enough that the base defense artillery could provide cover, far enough that the convoy still had to fight. Yemisi did not remember making the decision to lean out of her vehicle and return fire. She did not remember the way her hands found the rifle and her eyes found the targets. She only remembered the clarity, the absolute stillness at the center of the chaos. 3 shots, 3 fighters who stopped shooting back. Specialist Chun stared at her like she had grown a second head. The firefight lasted 6 minutes. 2 convoy vehicles took damage. 1 soldier caught shrapnel in his arm, but everyone made it back to the FOB alive. Everyone who was supposed to die in Crenshaw's ambush went home to their families. Wakefield found her after the debrief. The sergeant stood close enough that no one else could hear and asked where an intelligence analyst learned to shoot like that. Yemisi told her she had a good teacher. Wakefield studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked away. Crenshaw was waiting in the operations center when Yemisi returned. His face was purple with barely contained rage. He demanded to know who had changed the route authorization. He demanded to know how the convoy had survived. Yemisi looked at him with eyes that gave nothing away. She told him she did not know what he was talking about. She was just an analyst. Paperwork was above her pay grade. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the vein throbbing in his temple. "This is not over," he said. "Not even close." She held his gaze. She knew. 20 hours until the river crossing. 20 hours until Abu Samir. And now Crenshaw knew she was more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Yemisi did not go to her quarters that night. She knew Crenshaw would be watching, waiting for her to make a mistake he could exploit. Instead, she went to Captain Restrepo. She found him in his office, buried under paperwork that seemed to multiply every time he looked away. He glanced up when she entered, and she saw recognition in his eyes. He had heard about the convoy. Everyone had. She closed the door behind her and told him she had proof. Not suspicion, not analysis. Proof. Restrepo set down his pen. She had his full attention now. Yemisi laid out everything. The convoy route that Crenshaw had personally filed. The ambush positioned exactly where that route would have taken them. The modified authorization that saved 12 lives. She showed him the communication intercepts she had decoded. The pattern of attacks that matched information only someone with command access could have provided. She told him Master Sergeant Crenshaw was selling intelligence to the enemy. American soldiers were dying because of him. Restrepo listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked her how she had decoded encrypted communications that were supposed to be beyond her clearance level. She told him the encryption was outdated. Anyone with basic signals training could have broken it. He studied her face. She could see him weighing her words against everything he thought he knew about the quiet analyst who processed his paperwork. Finally, he spoke. He told her he believed her. He had suspected something was wrong for months, but could not find the source. But suspicion and proof were different things. If they moved against Crenshaw without ironclad evidence, he would walk. Worse, he would know they were onto him and cover his tracks. Yemisi told him there was a weapons transfer happening tomorrow night. River crossing, 3 miles east. Crenshaw would be there. If they caught him in the act, there would be no walking away. Restrepo shook his head. He could not authorize an operation based on intercepted communications that were obtained outside proper channels. The evidence would be inadmissible. Crenshaw would claim entrapment. His lawyers would tear the case apart. She felt frustration boiling up inside her. She asked him what he suggested they do. Wait for more soldiers to die while they build a case that satisfied the lawyers. His expression hardened. He told her he understood her anger. He shared it. But they had to do this right, or Crenshaw would escape justice entirely. He would put surveillance on Crenshaw, document his movements through proper channels, build a case that would stick. And the weapons transfer, she asked. Restrepo told her to let it go. If Crenshaw was there, his surveillance team would document it. They would have their evidence. Yemisi nodded. She told him she understood. She thanked him for listening. She did not tell him about Abu Samir. She did not tell him that the man who killed her brother would be at that river crossing. She did not tell him that no surveillance team was going to stop her from being there too. The arms room was quiet at 0200. Yemisi used her access code to enter, then moved through the darkness to the storage cage where her hidden equipment waited. She worked by touch, assembling the rifle she had smuggled onto the FOB piece by piece. The suppressor threaded on smooth and silent. The night vision optics clicked into place. The weapon felt like an extension of her body, familiar and deadly. She was loading magazines when the door opened behind her. Crenshaw stood silhouetted against the hallway light. He did not seem surprised to find her there. He stepped inside and let the door close behind him, plunging them both into darkness. His voice came from somewhere to her left. He told her he knew what she was. Not an analyst. Not some paper pusher who got lucky on a convoy. He had made some calls, asked some questions. Her file had holes in it big enough to drive a tank through. Yemisi stayed motionless, tracking his voice, calculating distance and angle. He kept talking. He said he did not know exactly what she was, but he knew she was dangerous. Dangerous enough that he could not let her keep digging. He told her about her brother, Marcus Adeyemi, Sergeant First Class. killed in action 2 years ago in Anbar province. She felt her heart stutter. Crenshaw laughed in the darkness. He told her he had wondered why she requested this posting, why she spent so much time studying convoy attacks. Now he understood. She was looking for the people who killed her brother, looking for revenge. He stepped closer. She could smell tobacco and sweat. He told her that her brother died because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nothing personal, just business. The same business that was going to get her killed if she did not back off. Yemisi spoke for the first time. She asked him if he had sold the information that killed Marcus. Crenshaw was quiet for a moment. Then he told her it did not matter. What mattered was that she was going to forget everything she thought she knew. She was going to stop digging. And she was going to spend tomorrow night exactly where he had assigned her, in the operations center, watching screens while the grown-ups handled business. She asked what happened if she refused. He told her that her mother lived alone in a nice house in Baltimore. Her younger sister had just started medical school in Philadelphia. Bad things happened to people all the time. Accidents, robberies, wrong place, wrong time. The threat hung in the air between them like poison gas. Yemisi made herself breathe, made herself think past the rage that wanted to close her hands around his throat. He was trying to provoke her, trying to make her do something stupid that would justify whatever he had planned. She told him she understood. She would stay in the operations center. She would stop digging. Crenshaw grunted. He told her that was smart. First smart thing she had done since she got here. Then he turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the darkness with her rifle and her fury. Yemisi waited until his footsteps faded. Then she finished loading her magazines. He had threatened her family. He had admitted knowing about Marcus. And in 16 hours, he was going to the river crossing to meet the man who pulled the trigger. She was going to be there too, and only one of them was coming back. The operations center felt like a cage. Yemisi sat at her station and watched the clock crawl toward nightfall, every minute stretching into an eternity. 12 hours until the river crossing. 12 hours until Abu Samir. And she was trapped behind screens and keyboards while Crenshaw moved freely through the FOB, preparing for his meeting with the enemy. She had hidden her gear in a drainage culvert 200 meters outside the wire. Getting out would be the hard part. The FOB had sensors, cameras, and guard positioned at every access point. Crenshaw had made sure she was scheduled for the operations center specifically because it was the most monitored location on base. If she left her post, someone would notice within minutes. The afternoon briefing brought news that made everything harder. A sandstorm was rolling in from the west. Visibility would drop to near zero by midnight. All patrols were being recalled. The FOB was locking down. Yemisi stared at the weather radar and felt the walls closing in. A sandstorm meant the river crossing might be postponed. It meant Crenshaw might stay on base. It meant her window was closing before it ever opened. But then she noticed something in the communications traffic. A burst transmission on the frequency she had been monitoring. Short, encrypted, but she recognized the pattern now. Crenshaw was confirming the meeting. The sandstorm did not change anything. If anything, it provided cover. She had to get out. Tonight. No matter what. Private Oduya appeared at her station with 2 cups of coffee. He set one down beside her and asked if she was all right. She had been staring at the same screen for 20 minutes without moving. Yemisi looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since she had covered for his mistake. He was young, scared, but there was something solid underneath the fear, something that reminded her of Marcus at that age, before the army had hardened him into the warrior he became. She told him she needed a favor, a big one, the kind of favor that could get him in serious trouble if anyone found out. Oduya did not hesitate. He told her he owed her whatever she needed. She explained what she wanted. At 2200, she needed him to trigger a fault in the operations center power grid. Nothing major, just enough to kill the lights and cameras for 60 seconds. Long enough for her to slip out the back access point. He asked her why. She told him there was something she had to do. Something important. She could not explain more than that. Oduya was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked if this had anything to do with Master Sergeant Crenshaw. She did not answer. She did not have to. He nodded slowly. He told her he had heard things. Rumors about Crenshaw. about money changing hands, about information flowing in the wrong direction. He told her that Sergeant Frazier, his squad leader who had been wounded in the ambush, was his mentor, the man who had gotten him through basic training, the man who might never walk again because someone on this FOB sold him out. He told her he would do it. 2200. 60 seconds of darkness. Yemisi felt something loosen in her chest. She told him to be careful. If anything went wrong, he should deny everything. Blame it on the sandstorm. Blame it on equipment failure. But never admit he did it on purpose. Oduya smiled for the first time since she had met him. He told her he learned from the best. The hours crawled past. The sandstorm hit at 1900, turning the world outside into a howling wall of brown and orange. Visibility dropped to 10 meters. The FOB became an island in a sea of swirling dust. Yemisi watched the clock. 2100, 2130, 2145. Crenshaw appeared in the operations center at 2150. He walked past her station without stopping, but she felt his eyes on her. Checking, making sure she was where he had put her. She kept her gaze fixed on her screen. Let him see what he expected to see. A defeated woman, trapped and helpless, watching the night slip away. He left at 2155. Heading for the motor pool, she guessed. He would take a vehicle out through the service gate, using the sandstorm as cover. By the time anyone realized he was gone, he would be at the river crossing. 2200. The lights died. The screens went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in 3 seconds later, painting everything in dim red. Yemisi was already moving. Through the back corridor, past the secondary communications room, out the emergency exit that led to the drainage ditch behind the operations center. The sandstorm hit her like a physical assault. Wind tore her clothes. Dust filled her mouth and nose. She pulled her shamak up over her face and pushed forward, navigating by memory toward the culvert where her gear waited. She found it by touch. The rifle, the night vision, the tactical vest with its pouches of ammunition and equipment. She stripped off her duty uniform and pulled on the dark clothing she had hidden with the rest of her kit. The river crossing was 3 miles east, 90 minutes on foot in good conditions. In a sandstorm, it could take twice that long. But the storm would cover her movement. No one would see her coming, not even the men she was coming for. Yemisi checked her weapon one final time. Then she turned east and disappeared into the howling darkness. She thought about Marcus as she walked, about the last time she had seen him, 3 weeks before his final deployment. They had argued about something stupid. She could not even remember what, but she remembered the way he had hugged her before he left, the way he had whispered in her ear that he was proud of her, that she was stronger than she knew. She had not believed him then. She was starting to believe him now. The storm swallowed her footprints behind her. The FOB vanished into the brown haze. And somewhere ahead, in the darkness along the river, the man who killed her brother was waiting. He just did not know it yet. The sandstorm began to die as Yemisi reached the ridge overlooking the river. The wind still howled, but the dust was settling, revealing patches of moonlit terrain between the swirling clouds. She dropped to her belly and crawled the final 50 meters to her observation point, a shallow depression between 2 boulders that gave her a clear view of the crossing below. The Euphrates gleamed like black glass in the darkness. 3 boats were already moored at the riverbank, their hulls riding low with the weight of wooden crates. She counted 12 figures moving in the shadows. Militia fighters in mismatched clothing, carrying weapons that ranged from ancient Kalashnikovs to modern American rifles. Rifles that had probably been taken from dead soldiers. She scanned the scene through her night vision optics, searching for the 2 faces that mattered. Crenshaw was easy to spot. He stood apart from the militia fighters, his American body armor incongruous among the loose robes and tactical vests. He was speaking with someone, gesturing toward the crates, negotiating. The man he was speaking to stood with his back to her position. Tall, lean, a red and white keffiyeh wrapped around his head and shoulders. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had survived 100 firefights and expected to survive 100 more. Then he turned, and Yemisi saw his face for the first time. Abu Samir. Her finger found the trigger before her conscious mind made the decision. The crosshairs settled on his chest. Center mass. An easy shot at this distance. She could end him right now. End the man who had taken Marcus from her. In 2 years of hunting and grief and rage. But something made her hesitate. A voice in her head that sounded like her brother. Slow down. The shot will come. Trust your training. She forced herself to breathe. To think. If she took the shot now, Crenshaw would escape in the chaos. The militia fighters would scatter. She would have her revenge, but the man who had betrayed American soldiers would walk free. He would find another contact, another way to sell lives for money. More soldiers would die. She needed both of them, and she needed proof that would hold up when this was over. Yemisi shifted her position, scanning the rest of the site. There, a fourth boat approaching from upstream, larger than the others. She watched it navigate the current and realized it was carrying more than weapons. There were people on that boat. Bound figures huddled in the bow. Prisoners. Her stomach turned to ice. This was not just a weapons transfer. Crenshaw was selling people too. Americans, maybe. Soldiers captured from ambush convoys. Sold to militias who would ransom them, or worse. She had to move. Had to get closer. Had to find out who was on that boat. Yemisi left her rifle in the observation point and drew her sidearm. Moving in a low crouch, she worked her way down the ridge toward the riverbank. The remnants of the sandstorm provided cover, patches of swirling dust that broke up her silhouette. She reached the abandoned village at the edge of the crossing and slipped between the crumbling walls. Voices drifted through the darkness. Arabic she could mostly follow, mixed with Crenshaw's flat American accent. They were arguing about price. Abu Samir wanted more money. Crenshaw was insisting the agreed amount was final. She crept closer, moving from shadow to shadow until she could see the fourth boat clearly. 4 prisoners, 3 men and a woman. Their faces were covered with hoods, their hands bound behind their backs. But she recognized the uniform on one of the men. Army combat fatigues. The name tape was too dirty to read, but the rank insignia was visible. A sergeant first class. Just like Marcus had been. Abu Samir's voice cut through the night. He was speaking to his men now, giving orders in rapid Arabic. He told them to prepare the cargo for transport. The American was satisfied with the weapons. Now, they would discuss the bonus merchandise. Crenshaw laughed. He said he had told Abu Samir these 4 would be worth the trouble. 2 intelligence officers and 2 combat engineers. The kind of people who knew things worth paying for. Yemisi felt rage building in her chest like a physical pressure. Crenshaw had not just sold information. He had sold people, fellow soldiers, handed them over to be tortured and interrogated, and probably killed when they had nothing left to give. She was so focused on the conversation that she almost missed the fighter who stepped around the corner of the ruined building. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened to shout. She moved on instinct, closed the distance before he could raise his weapon. Her hand clamped over his mouth while her other hand drove the blade into the base of his skull. He went limp without a sound, but the damage was done. She had been seen, and somewhere in the ruins, another fighter was calling out to his dead comrade, asking why he had not responded. Abu Samir's voice rose above the others. He was shouting now, telling his men to spread out. Search the village. The American had been right. Someone had followed him here. Crenshaw. He had known. Somehow he had known she would not stay in the operations center. He had warned them. Yemisi heard footsteps approaching from 3 directions. She was surrounded in hostile territory with a pistol and a knife while a dozen armed fighters closed in around her. She thought about running, about trying to slip through the cordon and disappear into the night. But that would mean leaving the prisoners, leaving them to whatever fate Crenshaw had sold them into. Marcus would not have left them. He would have found a way. She looked at the river, black water flowing past the moored boats. The fighters were searching the village, moving inland away from the bank. They expected her to run, expected her to flee into the desert. They did not expect her to go toward the water. Yemisi took a breath and ran for the river. A shout went up behind her. Gunfire cracked through the night. But she was already diving, already feeling the cold shock of the Euphrates closing over her head. She swam down into the darkness, letting the current carry her downstream toward the boats, toward the prisoners, toward whatever came next. Above her, the river ran red with moonlight, and the hunt was just beginning. The water was colder than she expected, cold enough to steal the breath from her lungs and turn her muscles into lead. Yemisi forced herself to keep moving, pulling through the black current with strokes that barely disturbed the surface. Above her, flashlight beams cut across the water like searching fingers. She surfaced beneath the hull of the nearest boat, gasping air as quietly as she could manage. Voices shouted in Arabic somewhere to her left. The fighters were spreading out along the riverbank, hunting for the intruder who had vanished into the Euphrates. Yemisi treaded water and listened. The prisoner boat was moored 20 meters upstream. She could see its shadow against the moonlit water, larger than the weapons boats, riding higher now that some of its cargo had been offloaded. The prisoners were still aboard. She had watched the militia fighters argue about moving them, but Abu Samir had ordered them to wait until the area was secured. She had minutes at most, maybe less. The current fought her as she swam upstream, clinging to the shadows beneath the moored boats. Her clothes dragged at her limbs. The cold sapped her strength with every stroke. But she kept moving, kept pushing, until her fingers touched the rough wood of the prisoner boat's hull. She pulled herself around to the stern, where a rope ladder dangled into the water. The boat rocked gently as she climbed, each creak of the wood sounding like a thunderclap in the darkness. She froze at the gunwale, listening. A single guard stood at the bow, his back turned, watching the search unfold on the riverbank. Yemisi slipped over the side and dropped into a crouch. The prisoners huddled in the center of the boat, still hooded, still bound. She counted them again. 4. 3 men and 1 woman, all wearing army uniforms beneath the grime and blood. She moved to the nearest prisoner and lifted the hood. A man's face stared back at her, eyes wide with fear that slowly transformed into confusion. He was young, maybe 25. A lieutenant's bar was barely visible on his collar. She pressed a finger to her lips. Then she whispered that she was American. She was getting them out. The lieutenant nodded frantically. She could see the questions in his eyes, but he had enough sense to keep quiet. Yemisi cut his bonds with her knife and moved to the next prisoner. Another man, older, with a staff sergeant's stripes. He was barely conscious, his face swollen from beatings. She cut him free and moved on. The third prisoner was the woman, a captain based on the rank insignia. She looked at Yemisi with eyes that held no fear, only cold calculation. The captain whispered that there were 6 guards total. 4 on the bank, 1 at the bow, 1 patrolling between the boats. Yemisi nodded. She asked if the captain could move. The captain told her she could do whatever was necessary. The 4th prisoner was unconscious. A sergeant first class with a head wound that had soaked his hood with blood. Yemisi checked his pulse. Weak but steady. He needed medical attention soon, or he would not make it. She gathered the 3 conscious prisoners close and explained the plan in whispered fragments. The prisoner boat had an engine. If she could take out the bow guard quietly, they could drift downstream with the current before starting the motor. By the time the militia realized what had happened, they would be out of rifle range. The captain asked about the guard between the boats. Yemisi told her she would handle that one first. She slipped back over the gunwale and into the water. The cold hit her again, harder this time, her body already weakened from the first swim. She gritted her teeth and pushed through it, moving along the hull toward the space between the prisoner boat and the nearest weapons boat. The patrolling guard was exactly where the captain said he would be, standing on a weapons boat, scanning the water with a flashlight. He never looked down at the shadow clinging to the hull beneath him. Yemisi pulled herself up the side of the weapons boat, moving with agonizing slowness to avoid making noise. The guard turned away, sweeping his light toward the riverbank. She lunged. Her hand closed over his mouth. Her knife found the gap between his body armor and his collar. He struggled for 3 seconds. Then he went still. She lowered his body to the deck and took his rifle. A Kalashnikov with a full magazine. Not her weapon of choice, but it would do. The bow guard on the prisoner boat had heard something. He was turning, peering into the darkness between the boats, his weapon half raised. Yemisi did not give him time to process what he was seeing. 2 shots, both center mass. He dropped without a sound. Shouts erupted from the riverbank. The gunfire had given away her position. Yemisi sprinted across the gap between the boats and landed on the prisoner deck. The captain was already at the engine, her bound hands somehow free, working the starter with frantic efficiency. The lieutenant was helping the staff sergeant to his feet. The unconscious sergeant first class lay where he had fallen. The engine coughed, sputtered, caught. The captain yelled for Yemisi to cut the mooring line. Yemisi slashed the rope with her knife and felt the boat lurch as the current grabbed it. Gunfire cracked from the shore, bullets punching into the water around them. She dropped to one knee and returned fire, forcing the shooters to take cover. The boat swung into the current and began to move downstream. The captain opened the throttle and the engine roared, pushing them faster, putting distance between them and the chaos on the riverbank. Yemisi kept firing until her magazine ran dry. Then she dropped the rifle and stared back at the receding shoreline. Crenshaw stood at the water's edge, illuminated by flashlight beams, watching her escape. Even at this distance, she could see the fury on his face. Abu Samir stood beside him, and unlike Crenshaw, he was smiling. He raised one hand in a mocking salute. Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness. The captain called out to her. She asked if Yemisi was hit. Yemisi looked down at herself. Blood was spreading across her side, dark and warm. She had not even felt the bullet. She told the captain she was fine. Then the world tilted sideways and the deck rose up to meet her. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Marcus's voice, somewhere far away, telling her she had done good. She had done real good. Yemisi woke to pain and motion. The boat was still moving, engine growling against the current. Someone had pressed a wadded cloth against her side, and every bump in the water sent fire shooting through her ribs. The captain's face swam into focus above her. She told Yemisi to stay still. The bullet had gone through clean, but she had lost blood. A lot of blood. Yemisi asked how long she had been out. 15 minutes. They were 2 miles downstream from the crossing. The captain had found a medical kit on the boat and done what she could, but Yemisi needed real medical attention. Yemisi forced herself to sit up despite the captain's protests. The world spun for a moment, then steadied. The lieutenant was at the engine, keeping them moving downstream. The staff sergeant sat slumped against the gunwale, conscious but barely. The unconscious sergeant first class had not moved. She asked about their destination. The captain told her FOB Reliance was 5 miles south. They could beach the boat and make contact from there. She had already tried the radio, but it was damaged. No way to call ahead. Yemisi shook her head. She told the captain they could not go back to the FOB. Not yet. Crenshaw would be returning too, and he would spin whatever story he needed to cover his tracks. He would say the prisoners were rescued by insurgents. He would say Yemisi had gone rogue, stolen equipment, endangered the mission. Without proof of what he had done, it would be her word against his. The captain stared at her. She asked what kind of proof Yemisi was talking about. Yemisi explained everything. Crenshaw selling intelligence, the convoy ambushes, the pattern she had uncovered, the encrypted communications. She told the captain that Crenshaw had been at the river crossing tonight, making deals with the same militia that had captured them. The captain was silent for a long moment. Then she said she had seen him when they first brought her to the crossing. She had seen an American in body armor speaking with Abu Samir like they were old friends. She had not believed her own eyes. Yemisi told her that her eyes had not lied, and if they wanted justice, they needed to catch Crenshaw before he could destroy the evidence. The lieutenant spoke up from the engine. He said there was another problem. Lights on the water behind them. 2 boats, maybe 3. Coming fast. Yemisi crawled to the stern and looked back. The lieutenant was right. Running lights, cutting through the darkness, gaining on them despite their head start. The militia had recovered from the chaos and launched pursuit. She asked how much fuel they had. The captain checked. Half a tank. Enough to reach the FOB, but not enough to outrun faster boats for long. Yemisi made a decision. She told the lieutenant to cut the engine and let them drift. Find somewhere to beach on the eastern bank. The captain asked if she was insane. They would be trapped on foot with wounded personnel and armed pursuers. Yemisi told her that was exactly what she wanted. On the water, they were targets. On land, in the dark, the advantage shifted. She knew this terrain. She had studied every satellite image of this stretch of river for months, and the men chasing them did not know who they were really hunting. The captain studied her face. Then she asked who exactly Yemisi was, because she was not just an analyst. Analysts did not move like she moved, did not fight like she fought, did not speak with the quiet certainty of someone who had done this before. Yemisi told her the truth would have to wait. Right now, she needed the captain to trust her. The captain held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded and told the lieutenant to find them a landing spot. They beached the boat in a narrow inlet where the riverbank rose into rocky terrain. The lieutenant helped the staff sergeant ashore while the captain carried the unconscious sergeant first class in a fireman's carry. Yemisi forced herself to move despite the wound in her side, every step sending fresh waves of pain through her body. She led them into the rocks, away from the river, toward a cluster of ruins she remembered from the satellite imagery. An abandoned village, destroyed years ago in fighting that no one remembered anymore. Nothing left but crumbling walls and empty doorways. But the walls would provide cover, and the maze of structures would neutralize the militia's numerical advantage. The pursuit boats reached the inlet within minutes. Yemisi watched from the shadows as fighters spilled onto the bank, flashlights sweeping the darkness. She counted 8, maybe 10, all armed, all angry. And there, stepping off the lead boat with a rifle in his hands, was someone she had not expected. Crenshaw. He was shouting orders, directing the militia fighters like he had done this 100 times before. And maybe he had. Maybe this was not his first time hunting people through the Iraqi darkness. Maybe the convoy ambushes and the sold intelligence were just the parts of his operation that she had managed to uncover. Beside him stood Abu Samir, calm and patient, watching the ruins with eyes that seemed to pierce the shadows. The captain whispered from beside her. She asked what the play was. Yemisi checked her pistol. 6 rounds left. The knife on her belt. The darkness and the terrain. She told the captain to stay with the wounded. Keep them quiet. Keep them hidden. No matter what happened, do not come out until dawn. The captain grabbed her arm. She told Yemisi she could not take on a dozen fighters alone. Not wounded. Not like this. Yemisi looked at her. She said she was not going to take them all on. Just 2. The 2 that mattered. She pulled free of the captain's grip and slipped into the darkness. The ruins swallowed her like an old friend. She moved through the shadows, silent as smoke, circling around the search party. The militia fighters spread out, moving in pairs, calling to each other in Arabic. They were scared. She could hear it in their voices. They had seen what she did at the river crossing. They knew something was hunting them in the dark. Good. Fear made people careless. Yemisi found a position overlooking the central square of the ruined village. Crenshaw and Abu Samir had stopped there, conferring in low voices while their men searched the surrounding buildings. She was 30 meters away, close enough to hear fragments of their conversation. Abu Samir was telling Crenshaw that this was his mistake, his woman, his problem to solve. Crenshaw responded that she was just an analyst. Nobody. He did not know how she had done any of this. Abu Samir laughed. He said that the nobody had just killed 6 of his men and stolen 4 prisoners. He said Crenshaw had underestimated her, and now they were both paying the price. Yemisi raised her pistol. 6 rounds, 2 targets, and a dozen witnesses who would scatter the moment the shooting started. She thought about Marcus, about the promise she had made to herself at his grave, about what justice really meant. Then she stepped out of the shadows and made her choice. Crenshaw saw her first. His face went pale in the moonlight, eyes widening as he registered the ghost stepping out of the ruins with a pistol aimed at his chest. Yemisi told him not to move. She told Abu Samir the same, switching to Arabic so there would be no misunderstanding. Abu Samir did not seem surprised. He studied her with the detached curiosity of a man examining an interesting insect. Then he smiled. and the smile was worse than any threat. He told her in English that he knew who she was now, the sister. He had wondered when she would come. 2 years was a long time to wait for revenge. Yemisi kept her pistol trained on Crenshaw, but her eyes moved to Abu Samir. She asked him if he remembered her brother. Abu Samir said he remembered all of them, every American he had ever killed. He kept count. Her brother was number 37, a good fighter, brave, stupid but brave. He had died trying to save the others in his convoy. Died for nothing, because Abu Samir had killed them all anyway. The words hit her like bullets. She felt her hand trembling, felt the rage building in her chest until it threatened to choke her. But she did not pull the trigger. Not yet. Crenshaw spoke up, his voice high and desperate. He told her she was making a mistake. He told her they could work something out. Money, safe passage, whatever she wanted. She told him to shut up. Crenshaw kept talking anyway. He told her she did not understand how things worked out here. The war was a business. Everyone was getting paid. The Iraqis, the contractors, the officers who looked the other way. He was just smarter about it than most. She asked him how much he got for Marcus. How much was her brother's life worth in his ledger? Crenshaw hesitated. Then he made the mistake of telling the truth. He said he did not remember. There were so many convoys, so many deals. He could not be expected to remember every single one. Yemisi felt something cold settle in her chest. The rage did not disappear. It crystallized into something harder, something sharper. She told him he was going to remember now. Abu Samir moved while she was focused on Crenshaw. He was faster than she expected, faster than a man his age should have been. His hand swept toward his belt and came up with a pistol of his own. She pivoted and fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways, but he did not go down. He returned fire as he fell, the bullet passing close enough that she felt the heat of it against her cheek. Crenshaw ran. He bolted into the ruins like a rat fleeing a sinking ship, screaming for his militia allies to help him. Yemisi had a choice: chase Crenshaw or finish Abu Samir. She chose Abu Samir. He was struggling to his feet, blood streaming from his shoulder, his pistol still clutched in his good hand. She closed the distance before he could raise it again. Her kick sent the weapon spinning into the darkness. Her follow-up strike drove him back against a crumbling wall. He laughed through bloody teeth. He told her she fought like her brother. The same fire, the same fury. He asked if she was going to die like him too. She told him her brother did not die like this. Her brother died a hero. Abu Samir was going to die like the coward he was. She hit him again and again. Every blow carried 2 years of grief. Every strike was a funeral she had attended alone because her mother could not stop crying long enough to stand. Every impact was a Christmas dinner with an empty chair, a birthday that no one celebrated, a phone that never rang with her brother's voice on the other end. Abu Samir stopped fighting back. He slumped against the wall, blood bubbling from his lips, and looked up at her with eyes that held no fear, only contempt. He whispered that killing him would not bring Marcus back, would not fill the hole in her heart, would not change anything. She told him she knew. Then she drew her knife. The militia fighters found them 5 minutes later. By then, Abu Samir was no longer breathing. Yemisi knelt beside his body, covered in blood that was not all hers, the knife still in her hand. They surrounded her with weapons raised, shouting in Arabic, demanding she drop the blade. She counted 6 of them. Too many to fight. Not enough ammunition left to shoot her way out. But they did not fire. They stared at the body of their commander, at the woman who had killed him with her bare hands and a knife, and she saw something in their eyes that was not anger. It was fear. One of them asked what she was. Not who. What. She did not answer. She just stood slowly, knife still dripping, and waited for whatever came next. A voice cut through the standoff. Crenshaw, somewhere in the darkness, shouting orders, telling them to shoot her, telling them to finish it. The militia fighters exchanged glances. Their commander was dead. The American who had promised them money and weapons was screaming at them from the shadows like a coward. And the woman standing before them had just killed the most dangerous man any of them had ever known. One of them lowered his weapon, then another. Then they were backing away, melting into the ruins, abandoning Crenshaw to whatever fate awaited him. Yemisi heard his voice change from commands to pleas. He was begging them to stay, begging them not to leave him alone with her. They left anyway. She found Crenshaw hiding in a collapsed building near the river. He was curled in a corner, clutching his rifle, shaking so badly that the weapon rattled against the stones. He pointed at her and told her to stay back. She kept walking. He screamed that he would shoot, that he would kill her like he killed all the others. She told him to go ahead, pull the trigger, see what happened next. His finger tightened. She saw the decision form in his eyes, the desperation of a cornered animal. The rifle clicked. Empty. He had fired his last round sometime during the chaos and never thought to reload. Yemisi smiled for the first time that night. Then she showed him exactly what happened to men who sold American soldiers to the enemy. Crenshaw tried to use the rifle as a club. He swung it at her head with all the desperation of a man who knew he was about to die. Yemisi caught the barrel, twisted, and tore the weapon from his grip. She threw it aside and drove her fist into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping, and she let him fall. She could kill him. It would be easy, easier than Abu Samir. Crenshaw was soft, a bureaucrat playing soldier, a man who let others do his killing while he counted money in the shadows. One strike and it would be over. Justice served, but dead men could not testify. Yemisi grabbed him by the collar and hauled him upright. She told him he had a choice. He could die here, in this ruin, and nobody would ever know the truth about what he had done. His family would get a folded flag and a story about a hero who died serving his country. Or he could live. He could face a court-martial. He could look the families of dead soldiers in the eye and explain why he sold their sons and daughters for money. He could spend the rest of his miserable life in a cell at Leavenworth, knowing that everyone knew exactly what he was. Crenshaw stared at her through tears and snot. He asked why she would let him live. After everything he had done, after Marcus, she told him that killing him would feel good for about 5 seconds. It would be over. But watching him rot in prison, watching him lose everything he ever cared about, watching the army he betrayed strip him of every honor and leave him with nothing but shame, that would feel good for the rest of her life. She asked him which option he wanted. He chose prison. Of course he did. Men like Crenshaw always chose survival, even when survival meant disgrace. They did not have the courage for anything else. Yemisi bound his hands with his own belt and dragged him out of the collapsed building. The ruins were quiet now. The militia fighters had vanished into the night, scattered by the death of their leader and the terror of the woman who had killed him. The only sounds were the wind through the broken walls and the distant murmur of the river. She found the captain and the others where she had left them. The captain was on her feet, a rock clutched in her hand like a weapon, ready to fight despite having nothing to fight with. The lieutenant crouched protectively over the 2 wounded men. The captain stared at Yemisi, at the blood covering her clothes, at Crenshaw stumbling behind her with bound hands and a broken expression. She asked if it was over. Yemisi told her Abu Samir was dead. The militia had scattered, but they needed to move. Dawn was coming, and they were still 5 miles from the FOB. The captain looked at Crenshaw. She asked what they were going to do with him. Yemisi told her they were taking him back. He was going to confess everything. Every convoy he sold out. Every soldier who died because of him. Every dollar he took from the enemy. And if he changed his mind along the way, she would change it back. Crenshaw said nothing. He had finally learned when to keep his mouth shut. They moved out as the sky began to lighten in the east. The captain took point despite her injuries. The lieutenant supported the staff sergeant, who had recovered enough to walk with help. Yemisi carried the unconscious sergeant first class across her shoulders in a fireman's carry, ignoring the wound in her side that screamed with every step. Crenshaw walked in the middle of the formation, surrounded by the people he had tried to sell into captivity. None of them spoke to him. None of them needed to. Their silence was louder than any accusation. The sun was cresting the horizon when they reached the perimeter of FOB Reliance. The guard on the wire saw them coming and sounded the alarm. Within minutes, soldiers were pouring out of the gate, medics rushing forward with stretchers, officers demanding to know what had happened. Captain Restrepo pushed through the crowd. He stopped short when he saw Yemisi covered in blood and dust, still carrying a wounded man on her shoulders. His eyes moved to Crenshaw, bound and defeated, and understanding dawned on his face. He asked her what she had done. Yemisi set the sergeant first class gently on a stretcher. Then she turned to face Restrepo. She told him she had rescued 4 American prisoners from a militia weapons transfer at the river crossing. She told him she had eliminated the militia commander responsible for multiple convoy attacks. And she told him she had captured the American collaborator who had been selling intelligence to the enemy for the past 18 months. She gestured at Crenshaw. She told Restrepo that Master Sergeant Dale Crenshaw was a traitor. She had 4 witnesses who had seen him at the river crossing, negotiating with the enemy. She had evidence of his communications with militia leadership, and she was prepared to testify to everything she had seen and done. Restrepo stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the MPs who had gathered behind him. He told them to take Master Sergeant Crenshaw into custody. He told them to read him his rights and secure him in a holding cell. He told them that nobody was to speak to the prisoner without his direct authorization. The MPs moved forward. Crenshaw did not resist as they led him away. He did not look back. Restrepo turned back to Yemisi. He told her she looked like hell. He told her she needed medical attention immediately. And he told her that when she was patched up, she had a lot of explaining to do. She told him she was looking forward to it. Then her legs gave out and the world went dark again. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. Medevac coming for the wounded, justice coming for the guilty, and somewhere, far away, the faint echo of her brother's voice telling her that she had done it. She had finally done it. Yemisi woke in a hospital bed 3 days later. The ceiling above her was white and clean, nothing like the dusty canvas of the FOB medical tent. She turned her head and saw windows overlooking a manicured courtyard, palm trees swaying in the breeze, American flags snapping on distant poles. She was in the green zone, Baghdad. A nurse noticed her stirring and disappeared through a doorway. Moments later, a man in a colonel's uniform entered the room. He was older, gray at the temples, with the kind of eyes that had seen everything and forgotten nothing. He told her his name was Colonel Nathan Webb. He told her she had been unconscious for 3 days while surgeons repaired the damage to her side. He told her she was lucky to be alive. Then he pulled a chair close to her bed and told her they needed to talk about who she really was. Yemisi said nothing. She waited. Colonel Webb told her he had read her file. Both of them. The official file that said she was an intelligence analyst with unremarkable performance reviews and no combat experience. And the other file, the classified one that detailed her recruitment from Delta Force selection, her training at a facility that did not officially exist, and her assignment to hunt a specific target in Anbar province. He told her the target was Master Sergeant Dale Crenshaw, not Abu Samir. Crenshaw had been the mission all along. Yemisi felt the pieces clicking into place. She asked how long they had known about Crenshaw. Colonel Webb told her they had suspected for over a year. Soldiers were dying in patterns that suggested a leak, but every investigation hit dead ends. Crenshaw was careful, connected, protected by people who benefited from his operation. They needed someone outside the normal chain of command, someone who could get close without raising suspicion, someone with a personal reason to be in Anbar province that would explain her presence if anyone asked questions. He told her they had found that person when they discovered an intelligence analyst whose brother had been killed in one of Crenshaw's ambushes. An analyst who had been quietly requesting transfers to Anbar for months. An analyst who had washed out of Delta selection under circumstances that could easily be reclassified. Yemisi understood now. She had been recruited without knowing it. Her grief had been weaponized. Her hunt for Marcus's killer had been steered toward a target the army needed eliminated. She asked if Abu Samir had ever been part of the mission. Colonel Webb shook his head. Abu Samir was a bonus, a fortunate coincidence. The primary objective had always been Crenshaw and the network he had built. She asked why they had not simply told her the truth. Colonel Webb leaned back in his chair. He told her that plausible deniability worked both ways. If she had known the full scope of the operation, her behavior would have changed. Crenshaw might have noticed. The mission might have failed. More importantly, if anything went wrong, she needed to be able to honestly say she had acted on her own initiative. A rogue analyst pursuing a personal vendetta was easier to disavow than a sanctioned operation against a decorated NCO. Yemisi let the anger wash through her. They had used her, manipulated her grief, let her believe she was alone when she had never been alone at all. But they had also given her exactly what she wanted: access to Crenshaw, the opportunity to expose him, the resources to hunt Abu Samir. They had pointed her at her enemies and let her do what she did best. She asked what happened now. Colonel Webb told her that Crenshaw's court-martial was already being prepared. The 4 prisoners she rescued had provided testimony. The captain in particular had been very thorough in her account of what she witnessed at the river crossing. Combined with the evidence Yemisi had gathered and the communications intercept she had decoded, the case was airtight. He told her Crenshaw would spend the rest of his life in military prison. The families of every soldier who died because of his betrayal would know the truth. Justice would be served. Yemisi asked about the militia fighters who had escaped, the network Crenshaw had built. Colonel Webb smiled slightly. He told her that was being handled. Abu Samir's death had thrown the organization into chaos. Without their leader and without their American contact, they were vulnerable. Operations were already underway. He stood and straightened his uniform. He told her she had done exceptional work that would never be officially acknowledged, work that would never appear in any citation or commendation, but work that mattered. He asked her what she wanted to do next. Yemisi thought about the question. She thought about going home, about seeing her mother and her sister, about trying to build a normal life away from blood and violence and secrets. But she also thought about the conversation she had overheard in the ruins. Abu Samir saying there were others like Crenshaw, others who had sold their country for money, others who were still out there, still betraying the soldiers who trusted them. She told Colonel Webb she wanted to keep working. He nodded as if he had expected that answer. He told her to rest, to heal. When she was ready, there would be another assignment, another target, another chance to do what she did best. He left her alone with her thoughts. Yemisi stared at the ceiling for a long time. She thought about Marcus, about the promise she had made at his grave. She had kept that promise. Abu Samir was dead. Crenshaw would rot in prison. Her brother had been avenged. But vengeance had not filled the hole in her heart. Colonel Webb's people had been right about that. Killing Abu Samir had not brought Marcus back. Nothing ever would. What had done was show her who she really was. Not an analyst, not a secretary playing soldier. She was something else, something forged in grief and hardened by purpose. She was a weapon, and weapons were meant to be used. Private Odia appeared in the doorway that afternoon. He looked nervous, like he was not sure he was supposed to be there. She waved him in. He told her he had heard what happened. Everyone had heard. The story was spreading through the ranks like wildfire. The analyst who had single-handedly taken down a traitor and a militia commander in one night. Yemisi told him the stories were exaggerated. He smiled and told her he did not think so. He sat with her until the nurses made him leave. They did not talk about the mission or the river or the things she had done in the darkness. They talked about home, about family, about the lives waiting for them when the war finally ended. It was the closest thing to normal she had felt in years. 3 weeks later, Yemisi stood at the edge of the Euphrates River for the last time. The sun was setting behind her, painting the water in shades of gold and red. The crossing where she had fought and bled and killed was somewhere upstream, invisible from here, just another stretch of unremarkable riverbank. She had built a small memorial on shore. Nothing official, just a cairn of stones with Marcus's name scratched into the largest one. His body was buried in Arlington, thousands of miles away, but this felt right. This was where his death had finally meant something. She knelt beside the stones and spoke to him. She told him about Crenshaw, about the court-martial that had begun last week in a military courtroom she would never see, about the charges that included espionage, conspiracy, and 23 counts of accessory to murder. about the families who were finally getting answers after years of wondering why their soldiers had died. She told him about Abu Samir, about the fear in his eyes at the end, when he finally understood that the hunter had become the hunted, about the way he had tried to bargain, tried to threaten, tried everything except accepting responsibility for the lives he had taken. She told him she was sorry it had taken so long, sorry she had not been faster, smarter, better. Then she told him she was proud of him, proud to be his sister, proud to carry his name and his memory into whatever came next. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of the river and the distant desert. Yemisi closed her eyes and let herself imagine, just for a moment, that it was Marcus's hand on her shoulder. Marcus's voice telling her it was okay, that she had done enough, that she could rest now. But she knew better. There was no rest, not for people like her. She stood and turned away from the river. Captain Restrepo was waiting for her at the edge of the FOB. He looked different than he had 3 weeks ago, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He told her he had something for her. Then he handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter, official army correspondence, stamped and sealed, informing Specialist Yemisi Adeyemi that she was being transferred to a new unit. The unit designation was a string of numbers that meant nothing to anyone who did not know where to look. She asked him if he knew what it meant. He told her he had some idea. He told her he had received a visit from Colonel Webb, that certain things had been explained. Not everything, but enough. He told her he was grateful for what she had done, for the soldiers she had saved, for the justice she had delivered when no one else could. Yemisi tucked the letter into her pocket. She told him she was just doing her job. Restrepo smiled. He told her they both knew that was not true. He extended his hand. She shook it. He told her to take care of herself out there, wherever out there turned out to be. She told him she would try. The helicopter arrived at dawn the next morning. Yemisi climbed aboard with nothing but a small duffel bag and the weight of everything she had learned. The crew chief handed her a headset, but did not ask questions. People in his line of work learned not to ask questions about passengers with no name tags and no unit patches. As the helicopter lifted off, Yemisi looked down at FOB Reliance one last time. The shipping containers and guard towers. The motor pool, where convoys still rolled out every morning. The operations center, where she had spent 4 months pretending to be someone she was not. She saw a figure standing near the landing pad, watching the helicopter climb. Private Oduya. He raised one hand in a small wave. She did not wave back, but she watched him until the FOB disappeared into the brown haze of the desert. The helicopter banked east, toward Baghdad, toward whatever came next. Yemisi leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. She thought about the woman she had been before all of this. The analyst, the sister, the grieving survivor who had come to Iraq looking for answers. That woman felt like a stranger now, a ghost from another life. The woman she had become was something else entirely, something harder, something sharper, something that would keep fighting long after softer people had given up. Colonel Webb had called her a weapon. Maybe he was right, but weapons did not choose their targets. Weapons did not decide what was worth fighting for. She was more than that. She was the woman who had walked into the darkness and walked out again. The woman who had faced the men who killed her brother and made them pay. The woman who had saved 4 lives and ended many more. She was Yemisi Adeyemi, and she was just getting started. The helicopter flew on toward the rising sun. Below, the Euphrates wound through the desert like a ribbon of silver, carrying its secrets toward the distant sea. The river that had run red that night. The river that had swallowed her enemies and given up nothing but silence. They never found who did it, the locals would say for years afterward. They never found the ghost who came out of the sandstorm and left only bodies in her wake. But Yemisi knew, and that was enough. If you made it this far, drop a comment and let us know what part of the story hit you the hardest. Was it the moment she chose justice over revenge? The truth about her recruitment? Or maybe you know someone like Yemisi, someone who turned their pain into purpose. We would love to hear your story too. Somewhere over the Iraqi desert, Yemisi Adeyemi smiled. The next mission was waiting, and she was ready.